Welcome back to By a Thread with Dr. Marci, where we stitch together wisdom, lived experiences, and the lessons that shape us, so you're empowered to keep going and keep growing in every season. If you've ever wondered how a woman can hold motherhood, advocacy, purpose, and personal dreams all at the same time, this episode is for you. Today, we are exploring the thread of voice and visibility. April 11th through 17th is Black Maternal Health Week, a week founded to highlight Black maternal health inequities and improve outcomes for Black women. And if you're not familiar with the statistics, these are deeply concerning. A disparity is a difference between groups that is often rooted in unfairness. And when it comes to maternal health outcomes for Black women are 3 times more likely to die from pregnancy-related causes. What's even more alarming is that the disparity is not explained by access to care or financial resources. It affects Black women across all levels of education and income. The recent loss of Dr. Janelle Green-Smith, a Black midwife and advocate for safe birthing practices, is a heartbreaking reminder of just how real and persistent this crisis is. So today, we're having a necessary conversation. And whether you are a Black mother or not, this matters to you, because when one group of women is 3 times more likely to die, that's not just a their issue. It's a reflection of a system that impacts all of us. In this episode, we speak with Tugune Davis, a wife, a mother of 2, and an advocate who uses her creativity and storytelling to fight back against maternal health disparities. Her story is one of purpose, courage, and using her voice to create, not just for herself, but for the generations to come. Let's welcome Tugune Davis to By a Thread. All right, so Tugune, I'm so happy to have you on the podcast. When I say this has been 3 years in the making, I am not lying. Like, I've had different podcast names, different ideas, and you are always one of the top guests to be there. So I'm so happy to have you today.
So happy to be here, Marci. It's taken, I feel like it's been longer than 3 years.
Don't put me out there like that.
Yeah, but this is just so, it's overdue. That's the best way
It is overdue. You've always been top guest for me. And I think it's good for the audience to know how we originate. So I've known you since Lila was 2 years old, and you were her very first dance teacher. You introduced her to everything. I remember you in that room with the balloons, keeping the girls entertained, introducing them to different forms of African dance and their little skirts and things that they would wear. You were literally her introduction into dance.
You know, it's funny to see her where she is now, and it's like, oh, I don't get the privilege to be around her, and she's such a gentle spirit. I miss her. But yeah, just when we first met, it was just really exciting to connect with another family that had similar values. So, and then as we got to know each other, it just got better. So yeah, we've known each other for a while.
All right, so let's get into it. For our audience who may not know who you are, can you introduce yourself and focus on the things that are your passions for the moment?
Sure. Well, my name is Tugune Davis. I am an artist and an administrator, filmmaker, and most recently became a philanthropist. Really excited about that. Most of my friends would either call me a dancer or they'll just call me an artist. So creatively, I like to see myself strictly as an artist because I do so many different art forms and work so well creatively. But I have a really big passion for nonprofits, as you know, when it comes to the arts. And as a filmmaker, just to become really passionate about telling stories of truth. Truth is really important to me. The documentary that I've been working on for a few years, as you know, highlights Black maternal mortality. And at the time, that wasn't a term, but I was just trying to investigate what happened to me. And in that process, as years went on, I discovered that it was actually a problem.
We'll get to the Black maternal mortality piece of it, but I am most interested right now in seeing how you made that decision to return to film school, and to go after your MFA. Having a family, having a business.
You know, I always wanted an advanced degree. So advanced degrees are not very widespread in my family. So it was important for me to evaluate the contribution that it would have long term on the impact on my kids, on my family at large, and, you know, get into the mix of changing the dynamic. Going to school later in life, that's a thing. That is something different. Just balancing it, and that was really a large decision making conflict, internal conflict, because one, you think grad school is for a lot younger, you know, in your 20s or your 30s, but more importantly, you've got a very established life. And considering how established we get once we get older in our years, you realize the sacrifice. You have to really weigh up the sacrifice. Because I'm pursuing a terminal degree, it's a 3-year program. So in a 3-year program, I sacrifice, you know, my kids aging and the impact of that. But the long term outweighs the short term when you're trying to change family dynamics and help your kids figure out, oh, this is something that I have to do. So that was a large part of making the decision, was layering what I have in theater. But largely, I was working on the documentary and I realized my resources were too thin. You get to a point as a filmmaker, if you're doing it without a large network, where you're asking for favors and you're realizing that you have to compromise your creativity in ways that you don't want to, simply because you don't have enough people or you don't have enough resources. So I literally said, I can't go any further in this documentary without having deeper resources. How do I get those? I've got to partner with an institution that's going to give me opportunities to know more people and have longevity, because this particular film for me is such that I need it to help me go from film to film to film to film. It's not one of those films where it's just like, oh, okay, I did that and that's cute. I needed it to be more than what I was used to. So I had to take on that next step.
So tell us about the documentary. Give us an idea of what the documentary is about, and if you could, where it came from. What prompted this pursuit?
Yeah, so I wanted to sue the hospital that I almost died at when I was giving birth to my youngest, Araya. She was born healthy and she was discharged before I was discharged. And I knew that I was being denied care for the simplest of things, and it was going to cost me my life. So that became an investigation of, you know, trying to backtrack. Okay, well, what happened to me? Why did it happen to me? And trying to get help to uncover that legally, because hospitals are just strictly going to shut you down. Oh, we follow protocol and that's it. Well, clearly you didn't, because I almost lost my life. So with the time that it took, I mean, when you have a baby, the tragedy that happened while I was in the hospital meant that we lost our ability to go back to where we were living because we were in the middle of moving. So the stacking of issues that came as a result of almost dying meant that ultimately I don't have time to deal with this in the time frame that I'm allotted legally. So when I got closer and closer to that, then it became a matter of, well, if I can't get these answers legally within the statute of limitations, I'm doing a film. That's it. And it became very conclusive because I'm nursing a baby. I'm trying to take care of my own self. I'm trying to take care of my husband. I'm trying to take care of a 3-year-old and a newborn and all the doctor visits of a newborn and my own doctor visits. And I'm trying to recover from almost not being here anymore. And and we have to find some way where to live. And it just took so much time that I could not meet the statute of limitations from what I thought was the statute of limitations. And that exhaustion just led me to say, I'm not going to mentally take myself through this process much longer because I have my weapon, and my weapon is creativity. Creativity heals me, and I have authority in my own voice, and I get to heal other people at the same time. There's no better way to handle grief than to dive into your own self process. So the documentary is definitely about my experience, but also encompasses the experience of other women and the totality of this Black maternal issue in America. I wish it was really just an American issue, but there's a lot attached to our roots in this country and the contribution of why we are where we are in the medical system, not just for Black women, but the medical system in general. So the documentary gives an opportunity for me to heal while I give an opportunity for other women to not wallow in the pain of what we're going through for Black women when it comes to having our babies, but how do we teach our daughters to feel good in the system that we're in? I think we know, in 2026, we know that there's an issue, but now how do we keep going and in a place where we're not fearful? How do we do that?
Yeah. You highlight something really important. There is fear. I have friends or women I've come across, myself included, who are like, one child, I survived. Why would I tempt fate again? And, as a believer, I know that's not really how things work, but there is that fear there because you hear the reality that Black maternal mortality is disproportionate, and there are no true explanations for it other than something structural that's happening. So when you say you want to address fear, I am like, that's a reality, because I am admittedly one of those women who've said, one is enough. Why would I do that again?
Yeah. And it's, when you look at the depth of that alone, how do you not place that in population control?
Can you elaborate on what you mean? Because I think I get you, but I think that's a really large statement.
At some point, we have to deal with historical facts on the desire for us culturally to not have a place here in America. We have to deal with the systems that are in place to eliminate our existence as much as possible. When you can get into the mind of a body of people so that they control what you want controlled, that historically has always happened to Black people. And we can't allow ourselves to ignore that fear is a strategy for controlling.
Mm-hmm.
And if you can get a body of people to execute their own fear, you don't even have to worry about it. I knew that because of the recovery and the PTSD that I had to deal with, I just was in no place to have another child. I think we would have had one more. We would have at least had one more because, you know, the try for a boy, try for a boy. And I'm happy with the family that we have. But if we would have had a more positive birth experience, I think we would have had one more. Yeah.
Tell me about that recovery or the impact of what happened on your life, even post-birth and now.
Yeah. Well, I'm still recovering. I mean, and it pops up at the least expected time. Just last month, I messaged my cousin who was an intricate part of me surviving. And I told her some things I just did not realize. I didn't realize. And we're 8 years later. And she said, one day I'll tell you medically what really happened to you. But she's never really medically said, this is what happened to you. And it's taken time to even process it, and you just don't even really realize how at risk you were. You know enough to fight because you're losing yourself, but what you're really fighting for and why you have to fight, why you have to use your voice, I don't think we always really understand that. We're experiencing it, so we're reacting out of an experience. But if we don't allow that experience to validate our voice, then at some point, unless somebody tells you, you're a layperson. You don't understand really the dangers.
And just to make some clarifications, your cousin, she has medical background, so she can guide you through. Is that correct?
Right. So my cousin is a nurse, but she was my doula for my firstborn. So she wasn't my doula because I had a midwife for my second. And by the time that I got into, you know, how I wanted to birth, I wanted to VBAC, which is, you know, try to have a vaginal birth after a cesarean. Not that I need to tell you.
No, but the audience needs to know. And there are disparities in, you know, who's offered a VBAC versus not.
Right. So I attempted to do that. And when I attempted to VBAC, it went well until it didn't. My cousin was really trying to not come to the hospital and kind of, oh, let me give them their space. You know how we do. Yeah. And it was my husband who called her and said, hey, something's just not right. So you need to come. So I think that's one of the strategies that we have to set up while we're preparing to have our babies is who do I know that can be a phone call, a lifeline, if I run into problems, and we have to get back into community. It's allegiance with each other to ensure that we're safe. And things could have gone very different.
That is actually one of the best forms of advocacy is having someone speak either with you or on your behalf who understands the language. That way they can be that translator between the docking you or between the medical field and you, or they can just set you up to be able to ask your own questions. But grabbing onto that person And a lot of people are willing to do it. So you don't have
Hmm.
to be afraid to ask, but
Hmm.
grabbing onto that person could be key. And for you, it was really life and death.
It was. It was. And I think husbands, fathers know, especially while you're birthing, they know that the role that they're playing is not the heavy lift.
Hmm.
And we have to help them understand that they're helping save that mom's life. That if we can equip them to understand what's happening in a hospital environment, just even shift changes are a big deal.
Oh, yeah. What does that mean in terms of how quickly things happen over a shift change?
I mean, simple things that she doesn't have to think about those things, but you can be on
Hmm.
it, you
Yeah.
know. And we're in tune with a life is coming into the world, but
Hmm.
in that process, we can be so overwhelmed and so ill prepared that we don't, in the moment, it's kind of too late because the time to really prepare is not when you're in that room
Not
getting
in
ready to
there. It's
deliver.
before.
It's well before.
I love that you talk about empowering the man in the situation. You're actually the first person I've heard speak to that as a way to potentially battle this issue. And I think that's super powerful. We've talked about the complication that you experienced, and it was life threatening.
Mhm.
So I'm just wondering, like, you may know you're in pain, but you don't know that you're literally knocking at death's door with this complication.
Right.
How do you speak up and advocate without having the medical knowledge?
The first line of defense really is preparing ahead of time. If you're not prepared ahead of time, you don't know those questions to ask. I had an extensive birth plan. And although in a typical birth plan, you're putting in there how you want to birth and how you want to be treated, you should also be putting in there clarity that you need in emergencies as well. So birth plan
Hmm.
typically is devised in a way where it helps your caregivers in a hospital environment or in a birthing environment to understand these are my wishes.
Yeah.
However, that should be a research plan. That
Hmm.
should be a plan where one, you're going to go to a hospital that you're familiar with, and you need to know the protocols for that hospital. I am the first one to ask too many questions. And I want to know things like, what are the protocols in place when there's an emergency? You know, at what point will a C-section be recommended to me? And if a C-section is recommended to me, how do you deal with if I'm not ready for a C-section? There's a lot of things that a mother and a father can be concerned about that
Hmm.
being in a situation, no, I don't know all the medical terms, but I know how you handle things here. I
Yeah.
know who the hospitalists are, and I potentially know when they're there. You know, I'm not walking into a situation where my life and my child's life is on the line, and I don't have any resources in that hospital to know how they operate. You know,
Yeah.
everybody doesn't have a, rapid response system. Everyone should,
Hmm.
but how that rapid response system operates is important. And those are not issues that are medical, medical terminology, but they'll save your life when it's time. We have to do better with things that are not casual. We take for granted the value of this precious moment, and we don't know how to safeguard it. So we have to take seriously that whenever you're getting married, getting divorced, having a baby, someone passes away, there's these crucial life and death moments, and we don't really take having a baby into that same light of, we're at war. We're in a battle right now.
Well, how do you recommend that women get started with their birthing plan? Maybe a mom who's set to give birth next month. What can she do to get started on her birthing plan?
Well, a mom that's giving birth next month, if you haven't already thought through it, you need to be sure that you're going to a hospital that has a rapid response plan. You need to know what hospital you're going to. And if you do know a hospital you're going to, you need to take seriously the resources that they have in place in the case of an emergency. People don't take advantage of hospital tours. I took advantage of every hospital tour that I could.
I like that.
And most people don't even realize that hospitals have them. Go tour those environments. Can you imagine trying to birth a baby and you're in another space with another woman trying to have a baby? That might be okay with you. That might be okay. But there are some hospitals where that's just not how they birth babies. You don't want to find that out too close to when you're getting ready to have a child. You need to know your family history. If you know your family history, I will never forget the value that Serena Williams had in knowing her own history and how her body functioned, and the assertiveness that she made sure happened because she knew her body. That's vital for us. And if you don't know, dig into your family history. Think back to things that happened in your childhood that might impact your delivery, surgeries that you may have had. Your medical history and your knowledge of your medical history is really, really valuable. At some point, a doctor will be able to say, oh, this can be avoided, or I need to change what I'm planning for this patient because they share with me about this medical information that they have. When you walk into a hospital room, nobody knows you. You cannot expect that when you walk into that room that everybody knows how to handle you. And your birth plan needs to validate how people who do not know you should handle you. And if you've outlined in there the bullet points or the reasons why certain things have to be a certain way, then that gives your care team the information that they need to understand how to support you. Generally speaking, nobody wants to see casualties happen in a hospital. Nobody wants that. Nobody needs that on their head. People want to keep their jobs. We have to get into the humanity of what all of this means. Additionally, for us, please ensure that somebody on that care team looks like you. I cannot stress that enough. When we get human out of experiences. And even if someone's not being personable with you, you look like their mom. You look like their dad. You look like their uncle. Even if it's not a minority that's your exact ethnicity, get a different minority. Be sure there's other minorities who understand the challenges that come with the territory of people dismissing you. That is the largest reason why we have these issues, is because we don't have relatability. And if you can relate on the care team to a patient, that brings down the barrier significantly. Those are things that if I was 30 days out from having a baby, that I would be sure I had in place. People who look like me,
Hmm.
know where I'm going to the hospital and what their emergency procedures and protocols are, know my own history. Those
Hmm.
things are crucial to help people who don't know you.
I love all that. I mean, it's just so well thought out. It's not superficial. The family history. Man, that is no small deal because first of all, no one talks about their pregnancy. You just know that they had a baby. You don't
Right.
know that they had preeclampsia or they had all these different complications,
Mm-hmm.
maternal bleeding after their
Mm-hmm.
pregnancy. And that could be vital information for you to share as part of your family history with your
Mm-hmm.
doctors. If at nothing else, it at least puts it at the top as a risk factor for them so that they're more in tune to your blood pressures or more in tune to you having some swelling or things
Right.
like that. So that I think is a very astute point is know the family history of those around you. And we just don't talk about that, but we need to start talking about that.
We don't. And one of the things that I think is really quite funny, we do all this dreaming and all this planning,
Hmm.
and the reality is part of the challenges that I had with birthing my babies is my husband comes from a family that are big people.
Ah, oh yeah. So his family history too.
I'm not, my mother was like, what are you doing having a baby that's 9 pounds, 5 ounces? We're
Yeah,
like
how
a
large are the
6 pound
babies in
baby.
your family?
Like, we don't have babies this size. You know what I mean? That created some of my complications. Ladies, we cannot sit in a vacuum and just what we want and how
Hmm.
we want it and everything like that. Part of what's happening to us has to do with who we're having a baby with. And we're not,
Yeah.
we're not talking about that.
Yep.
So these family ties are important, you know,
Hmm.
and if we don't have it, we need to think seriously about how we're choosing to have children. We need to think
Hmm.
seriously about that
Choose
and
wisely.
choose
Choose that
wisely.
person.
Choose
I'm just
wisely.
kidding.
And I'm
But
not
at least
saying
know the
don't,
history.
right. I'm not saying don't have a baby with someone that you love because it might be, a kind of situation. But I'm saying that know ahead of time what are
Hmm.
you putting at risk before you even get into the situation.
Okay, so one thing I wanted you to let us know is what is the role of doulas and midwives in birthing?
A doula is someone that's going to be a support for you in a lot of ways. So similar to a nurse, if you think back in the day of how a nurse would be there for you, just kind of side by side, not just a moral support, but the type of support that is equipped to know when to do specific things that are going to help you progress in your labor.
Hmm.
One of the things, not just on the day that you deliver, but along the way. A doula is going to be someone who has the resources at the drop of a dime to stand side by side with you through everything that you're going to experience.
Hmm.
A midwife is trained to deliver the baby. So you would think of a midwife similar to how we think of an OBGYN. And you would think of your doula more like how you might think of a nurse. However, they're much more in tune with how we're designed to actually birth a child. They're not trained on focusing on the science and the medical perspective of prescription, the science of it from that perspective. They're more focused on the science of your body and how it functions, but not necessarily the medical practice of delivering a baby. A midwife and a doula is more concerned about the holistic aspects of how you function as a human.
How can someone go about getting a doula or a midwife, like in a
There's a,
hospital setting?
So some hospitals actually have them as part of their maternity ward.
Oh, okay. So they're part of the team.
They're part of the team. I would be careful about those kind of midwives and doula teams because they're still connected to the hospital environment. They
Okay.
still have bosses that are scientists. So it can be good, it can be very good. But when we think about having babies in a way that's natural to our body, a midwife and a doula are going to have very different strategies on how to get your body to do what it's supposed to do than you're not going to see that in a hospital environment. So in a hospital environment that has midwifery, you're still going to see some things that are akin to the medical field versus to specific holistic things that get your body to do what it's supposed to do. Some things cross. Like I sat in a hospital with a birthing ball.
No, no. I love that advice. I really like that advice. So just a few wrap up questions.
Mm-hmm.
So when you look back on your journey so far, what has surprised you the most about yourself?
I think the ways I stand up for myself, I think that's always a surprise. And the responses that people have to it. We a lot of times we don't allow ourselves space to see that what we're going through is okay because we're in the middle of resolving it.
Yeah.
And I've learned to be okay with some of the valleys. I've learned to be
Mm-hmm.
really okay with valleys and allow myself to be in those moments, even when people want to rush me out because it makes them feel
Yeah.
uncomfortable. You have to get to a point to where you know how to manage
Mm-hmm.
your low moments. And I'm okay with low moments.
Mm-hmm.
And I get more comfortable with low moments because I know I'm not going to be there long. Be
It's
there long.
temporary. So thank you, Tugune, so much for that. I'm so happy that you were able to join us
I
today.
thank you.
Thank you. I want to thank Tugune for sharing her story, her voice, and her work with us today. This conversation reminds us that advocacy doesn't always start in policy rooms. Sometimes it starts in lived experience, in motherhood, and moments that change how we see the world. And what we heard today is bigger than one story. It's a reminder that disparities don't happen by accident, and because of that, they require intention, awareness, and action to change. So as you leave this episode, I want you to sit with this. What does it look like for you to use your voice in the spaces you're in? Whether that's advocating for yourself in a doctor's office, supporting another woman, or simply choosing to learn more, your voice matters. Because change doesn't just come from systems. It comes from people who decide to speak, to act, and to care. And if you are a mother listening, or a woman navigating any space where you feel unseen or unheard, let this be your reminder that your experiences are valid, your voice is powerful, and your presence matters. Thank you for spending this time with us on By a Thread. If today's conversation encouraged you to share it, share it with another woman who may need it. And remember, whatever season you're in, you can keep going and keep growing. See you next time.